we don't understand that even though we're being told that something's good, and we want to have that, they give us something that we want, the underlying obligations and attachments that come with that are not necessarily seen. And we have been dumbed down to not necessarily look. There's a process by which you can have your mind led. And I hadn't read the text, but the Codex Alimentarius is included as an attachment standard to the Proposition 37. That means that they're going to have an international standard underpinning that. That comes from the UN. UN standards, and you hear me persistently talk against them because of what they end up doing in a sovereign capacity for people wanting to keep the do-gooders out. And the war that's against us, using soft law coming in, you adopt that law, that's international law, and you don't have to have a treaty. That's how they've been doing it. That's how the Congress has been killing us, is the ability for the Council to change things. And there's no election on it. There's no choice. The problem with Prop 37 is incorporating a standard of a Codex Alimentarius, which is supposed to be an international law done by industry outside the nation, not as part of domestic law. The other consideration that's brought up, and I don't know if you know much about this, you can find out that the USDA has taken possession of the word organic. And I've told you that the word organic doesn't mean organic. It means that by definition, it can be organic food labeled such and controlled by the FDA and now possessed, the word possessed and control. In other words, if you use that word and you don't have their permission, the force of the United States government will come on you like you've never believed. So they are going to impose that whether you believe they can control a word or not. But so the FDA is in possession of that word organic, and you, as a manufacturer or someone who reads the label, is not in control of that. And that word, I've told you, you go look it up. I apologize for not having all the facts here for you. You go look it up. Find the statute that says so. It's in the code. There can be, I think it's 5% adulteration to organic food. And you've heard me talk about the adulteration now that works down to the severe adulteration, severe effects caused by these small infinitesimal adulterations down to the molecular level, like in the products called Neotame, the new generation of aspartame, that they don't even have to put them on the label anymore. That's what organic, the label of organic did. And this becomes now the problem. This becomes the hidden Trojan horse. Now, you also know the USDA, and you know the international corporations like Monsanto and all of them. I don't even want to go. You know them all sitting inside and controlling the round door that they have, right to the agencies. You know, Monsanto's right in on this. They also want to be the world's food supplier. They also want to control all the seeds. They also are in bed with the FDA, who controls the word organic. And there becomes a dynamic that we just don't understand. We're not involved in it. That while we are told, we need to have this law to make sure that you are told that when the GMOs are on it, you didn't go read the statutes on the enforcement and exceptions section. And you didn't go to the next step in the chess game that says that only that if you want to get involved with being an organic or label, that you're going to have to pay the organized criminal that protects that name. And maybe if you were to think about this, that maybe the little guy may not be able to get that designation. And if you're not able to pay for the protection, maybe you're not going to be able to be protected by a law that it looks like on the surface. It's supposed to warn you off of stuff that may be bad for you. He makes mentions of global standardized seeds and product. You're not going to get that unless you pay the piper, essentially. So put that over there on your right in red crayon. This is the highlight. This is what is brought in. This standardization is what happens now when you bring in through Prop 37 the standard of a Codex Alimentarius. Like I said, on the surface, it's really cool. But what you find out that they limit may very well get, well, let's say like being mentioned here, blemishes and size of fruit and this and that. Well, if you're not quite up to standard, you're going to be wasting a lot of food that you can't sell. Now, the other thing I'll tell you is right now, Codex Alimentarius is external to the nation, and that's the other problem. Those standards for size and for heritage crops and things like that wouldn't affect you until that Codex standard is brought in. There's your proof that you don't need the treaty in order to have an international standard apply. You did it to yourself on the state level. And that's the worst place it actually can be. In fact, you know, when you get right down to it, the local agreement is the worst type of consent. You got mob rule, 51 people telling the rest what to do. The 49% what to do. So this is, in the red crayon part, the notice is that they're going to do global standardization. You're importing any of these laws like this that have, and I'm going to it gets a whole lot more simply done than adding a whole lot onto this, like these international standards, to ensure that your GMOs are labeled. You know, that would really be the key, wouldn't it? But this is the danger of Prop 37 that I'm seeing. And this is the whole point. You rah, GMO labels, yeah, vote yes. And then you find out, well, wait a minute, it wasn't just that. It was to bring in a whole other standard. And as I left the break, I was talking about that standard will only be met by people that will pay the organized criminals to protect you. And a lot of small farmers can't. You can't keep up. You can't do the type of regulation it needs. Remember, too, regulation in this regard is license, and I've told you license is permission to do what is otherwise an illegal act. So, in other words, organic now is defined by the government, owned by the government, and it says, well, 95% has to be pure. The rest of the 5%, oh, no, go ahead, you can put that in. You have a license to adulterate organic. That should be a moral crime. And I think it is. It's a moral crime. But see, legally, it's not lawful. It's legal. So we've been through all this stuff, and now I'm trying to apply all these things I tell you behind the woodshed. That again, now we get into the law better, is telling me, and I haven't, again, had the time, so you're going to have to back this up, that what this ends up doing, because of this dynamic where the federal government owns and enforces the ownership of the word organic, and the condition that in the Prop 37 that organic is going to be either treated as a lesser stringent enforcement or is exempt, then anybody who doesn't have that is going to have to meet the most stringent guidelines. And the other problem with this, 2 guidelines. You'd think it would be 1, but there's 2. One has to follow the federal. The other one they can make up. In other words, if you don't have organic on your label, which allows you to adulterate your food by 5%, you're going to have to hold to the harder standard, which is 0.05%. And you have to prove it. Because in the enforcement section, they've allowed what they do like in Clean Water Act citizen suits or these environmental suits. And this is the environmental taint that's on this that I can tell you absolutely is it is the penultimate danger to us that we have to stop. That you don't even, as a plaintiff, you come in the name of the state, of the people, on their behalf, no less, with the power of the state, without the need to show a harm. You can articulate and present a hypothetical harm and put that power on somebody, and they have to prove a negative. I don't know if you know that. That's right in this law. I don't have to read hard to see that part. That's right in the enforcement. So there's a double standard, and you may not be able to meet it. Think about this. And when they move it, I'm telling you, you don't think you're a food producer. You wait. You've been hearing coming down that your garden is next, if it already isn't. We've already heard the court cases where woman in L.A. grew tomatoes long time ago. She got found guilty for growing those tomatoes because she affected interstate commerce to Georgia, of all places. I think that's where it was. If I'm incorrect on some of these, just go for the sentiment that I'm trying to point it out and the intention. Again, I really haven't had a chance to do this. I'm just telling you there's a real big problem. They have 2 standards and they have an enforcement clause that is death to anybody who can't afford to be in the game. Who can be in the game? But all the multinationals. Monsanto for sure. If you don't have standardized seeds, how do you then comply? If you have to prove you have standardized seeds, how do you comply? If you haven't proved you have standardized seeds and someone complains to you, you're going to pay money, period. And the government will be right there to suck it out of your bank account or take it from your property. And that's all. I'm just talking now. I kind of got beyond. I'm telling you now the obvious things that are in the bill. You're promoted into believing that this is GMO labeling. What you don't know, and we have been kind of educated out of doing, is going to the bill law and look at the text to see what they're doing with it. And this ends up being the method by which they subvert your entire nation and your rights and your abilities and put in the hands of others the power to determine your life. And we don't know the group, the organic group that hired an attorney, came under the name of organic. We don't know who the participants were, that Monsanto wasn't part of this. And the attorney that wrote the bill, that is the GM Prop 37, he has written another bill, and its outcome was this deceptive outcome. It was the imposition of an international authority on a domestic source. And this was probably, we can't prove this part, but it looks like it was proved by those that could pay for it. And so now we see that there's a motivation between those that want to control your food and those that are trying to get you to vote on a bill they've prepared that has limitations and a double type of an unequal enforcement capacity, which might be very detrimental, well beyond knowing what GMO is in your food. And wait till you hear about that. Now, just to let you know, I'll just read one of the paragraphs out of this. They talk about Codex Alimentarius in this capacity, right where I was telling you about the standards. No testing procedure shall be approved by the department unless, one, it is consistent with the most recent, quote, guidelines on performance criteria and validation of methods before detection, identification, and qualification of specific DNA sequences and specific proteins in foods, closed quote, published with the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and it does not rely on testing of processed foods in which no DNA is detectable. That's just one clause in this GMO required to be on your label law. Now, that last little tag tells you there's a problem. Testing on processed foods in which no DNA is detectable. How do you know that unless you've had your food detected? Did you think about that? Now you've just seen that everybody that produces food will more than likely look like they're going to have certifications that their food has no GMOs, no detectable GMOs. No is down to 0.05%, I believe was the number that she said. And that's because you don't have the organic food label. How many local farmers, we say go buy local, how many of those people are going to have the ability to do all the legal procedures to get into the FDA and buy a license to use their term organic so that they aren't beat down more than the 5% that the big guys do? Now let me give you another thing that she brought up. Because of the exceptions that are built into Prop 37, that 2/3 of the existing GMO products will not be required to list those GMOs on the label. A lot of it is because they're not produced here locally. So here you see the Codex now being standardized in the state, and it excludes all the existing stuff. Why? Because they're under the Codex already, under the standards that are going on. They don't have to even be tested. So if they don't have to be tested, how do you find out that they are in compliance? And you've heard, if I can get to it, we're going to show it. It's just, China's just not doing it. We've heard the horrors coming out of China for their food, even though they're supposed to be, the Codex is written in Chinese. Again, this is nothing, you have to understand, this is a guideline on top of it all. They impose it like it's the law, but it's a guideline. That if you're not within it, you're not going to get much. In fact, you're going to get beat down. You're going to get a lot. It ain't going to be what you think it is. You're going to get beat down. All these SWAT. You think raw milk people are seeing some trouble. 2/3 of the GMOs that are on the market right now, even though they're supposed to be a GMO labeling, will not have labeling for those GMOs. Is that the law? Is that a law you really want? We really have to think about this, how well they're playing us if that's the case. The revolving door of Monsanto exec used to be the USDA chief, used to be the Monsanto exec. So this is what we start appreciating the position. I said I've always told you we're infiltrated and surrounded. This is one of those examples right here. We see it in these revolving doors.